It's time to take command with former NFL tight end Logan Paulsen and former Commanders beat reporter Craig Hoffman.
It's the Take Command podcast. You're getting the B team this week. Hoffman on the road. He gets to be in Paris. I saw some pictures that he posted, Logan. I got very jealous. But you get the B team. Denton Day filling in. It's Denton Day and Logan Paulsen. Logan, it's been a minute, my friend. How are you? Summer going well?
Yeah, good, man. Been a busy summer. Been kind of an awesome summer. A couple trips here and there, just enjoying living life. You know what I mean? How about you? Get anything done?
Yeah, went on a trip or two. Got nice tan. You can't see it, but there is a little bit of tan in there somewhere. I'm ready for football season, though, man, and we got a lot to discuss. Yesterday on Sunday, Dan Quinn announced that Jayden Daniels going to be playing in preseason game number 1. It was just about a month ago that Joe Theismann jumped on Craig's show on the Team 980, saying that he doesn't think Jayden Daniels should play in the preseason. Dan Quinn obviously feeling opposite. Initial reaction, him saying that Jayden Daniels will play. No word yet on if he'll start, but we know that Five will get a little bit of action.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important, man. I think it's important that he does play. I know people have kind of, poo-pooed or forgotten about the preseason, but I do think it's an important kind of ramping process. Like, this is the guy that's going to be your franchise, like, moving forward, hopefully. And I understand you want to keep him safe, but I also want to make sure that he's, like, ready, And I think as long as he's ready to go, like, this is part of making sure that he is ready. This is part of, like, that whole process, meaning, like, I want to know how he is, like, with the headset on the sideline. I want to know how he is, like, in the huddle. I want to know how he is, like, when things aren't exactly perfect. So that's kind of a big thing for me, is like, this just seems like a good step in that direction as far as evaluation. I do think it's interesting to see, like, is he going to start, or is Marcus the guy? So, well, I think it's the right thing. Again, like, I'm always about, like, I want to get as much, and this is how I was as a player, so maybe that's why I feel this way, but, like, I want to see him kind of go through these steps. I don't want his first time in a Commander's uniform to be, week 1. Like, I don't think that's the right thing either, so.
Yeah, I feel like that's a tough. I mean, the guy's played a lot of football, a lot of seasons in college, a lot of games in college. So obviously he knows how to play. But I'm right there with you when it comes to not just throwing him out there in week 1 to the Sharks. I think you have to get him a little bit of experience in the real game kind of atmosphere. I don't think, as hard as you can go in practice, and whether that be practice with your guys or with the joint practice, which they'll have later this week, I don't think you can replicate that in-game action where there is no special colored jersey. Like, you're going to get touched up, and hopefully not too touched up, right? Like, I don't want to see him, get destroyed or doing anything. But I mean, I'm excited. I got to see him this weekend in person for the first time, and there is an element to him where he just does look really, really different from the other 3 quarterbacks. That's not to say that those quarterbacks aren't looking good, but there's just something natural about him when it comes to throwing the football, where the touch, the ease where he can deliver the ball down the field, like, it is really, really exciting. I'm of the belief he should start. And my thought process, Logan, is not only do I want him to get reps, like you mentioned, I want him to get reps, though, with the guys that he's going to play with. And
yeah, I think that's the other thing, though, too. Like, if you sit him and, like, he doesn't play, like, does Terry also sit? Does Jahan sit? Like, does the offensive line sit? Like, I think it's just good to get guys like those repetitions out there on the field. And I think you bring up a great point. Like, it's like he looks good in practice, right? But I want to see him look good against a different colored jersey where he can get touched up, where that pressure is real. I'm sure you saw some looks today in practice where it wasn't exactly, like, there's a little bit of a pressure. Is that a sack? Is that a first down completion? Like, I've seen that throughout training camp, and, like, now we get answers. Like, how does he handle that guy, right in his face? Can he still deliver that ball? Can he handle as the dial, as the temperature turns up on the position, I think is the thing that I want to see. And like you said, he's played a lot of football, so maybe that's an unfair ask. But as I know, as a coach, like, I always coach, like, when I coach people now, like, I appreciate that kind of gentle ramp up. And as a player, like, I really appreciate it, because people don't understand, like, you have a tempo in practice, but then when you get in that preseason game, it turns up a little bit, right? You're on the field, you're by yourself, you got to make your own decisions, you're independent of the coach, you're operating first, second, third down, you kind of are thinking of the game in a different way. And to me, like, if I was a player, I'd want it. And I think as a coach, it just helps. And if I'm Adam Peters, like, I just want to help kind of flush out my evaluation. I think we're still trying to determine on some level if he's ready to go. And I think this is a critical data point in kind of fleshing out that evaluation.
When you hear Dan Quinn say that he's going to play, are you more excited to see what he can do throwing the football against the opposition, or are you more excited to see if a play breaks down in the preseason? And like, I'm not expecting them to go crazy with some of their play calling, but if a play breaks down in the preseason, to see what his speed looks like at this level. We saw it in college, and he was leaving people in the dust in the SEC. But are you more excited about the running element in the preseason, or more about the passing element?
I think it's probably the passing element, because I think if you want to be a top 5 player at the position, you got to throw the football. And I'm not saying he's there yet or he's ever going to get there, but I think you want to see those foundational elements of how he delivers the football, how he layers throws, and you've seen some of that stuff in practice. So I guess maybe what I really want to see is I want the nation to see what he's looked like in practice, right? A guy that looks very accomplished, really. And I think, obviously, like, I want to see how he stacks up against an NFL defense from a speed standpoint, but I think the priority for me in terms of my evaluation is how is he as a passer. I think when you look at, like, Anthony Richardson from last year, like, everyone went, oh, he's the third quarterback in that class. He's going to take some time to develop, and he comes out and starts throwing the football versus NFL defenses, and you're like, holy cow, this guy is a much better player from the pocket than we thought, and it gives that offense a totally different ceiling and a totally different outlook. And I think Jayden in this offense, if he throws the football the way that we've seen him throw it in practice, the same thing applies to the Washington Commanders.
Yeah, my hope is that we are sitting here on either Sunday or Monday, or even when the game is still going on and we're at the point where he is no longer playing, and the fan base is collectively losing its mind about a throw, right? It doesn't have to be like a series of throws, but it just needs to be, because I don't know how much he's going to play, but if he goes, 10 plays, let's just say 10 plays, 2 series, something along those lines, and he just delivers one of these throws that we've seen on social media in practice, where it's touch in the corner and somebody gets his feet down. I mean, I was standing right in front of the pylon on Sunday, and he delivers this beautiful pass to Jahan Dotson where only he can get it. It's right along the sideline. He tiptoes in there, and I want the fan base to be freaking out. Now, I recognize that we don't really care what happens in the preseason. There's plenty of fool's gold in the preseason, but I do think there is a segment of the fan base, and really maybe just fans across the NFL, that think of him more as he is going to be Lamar Jackson, like the runner in year number 1, or because of some of the experiences that we had with this organization in 2012, he's going to be more like Robert Griffin III, the runner, and that's exclusively how he's going to make plays with his legs. I hope after the first preseason game, we see just a little tidbit of like, oh, no, this guy he has the potential to be kind of what you alluded to, be a guy that could be at the top of the league in this position should things go the way that they should. Like, if we just get like one of those throws where it's the touch is amazing, I would consider that to be a successful preseason game number 1 for him.
Yeah, and like, I think, obviously the throw is important, but how does he handle himself in the pocket? Like, how does he handle pressure? I think that was another thing that people levied against him in terms of draft evaluation. He doesn't handle pressure well. His eyes come down and focus on the rush when there's pressure. Like, he has a hard time with tight window throws. Like, this is a time where you're going to see some of that stuff, to a certain degree. It might not be dialed up to 11 like it's going to be in season, but as of right now, like, those are things. So, like, you're talking about completing footballs, and obviously I want to see that, but I also want to see him just play the quarterback position, like from a fundamental standpoint, because it seems like he can do it. And if he can do it, this offense can be really dangerous. But I want to see everything from him. So the idea that I get to watch that in the preseason is really exciting to me. And I think it's something that, again, like, there is a little bit of risk associated with it. So I understand what Joe Theismann's saying when he says, oh, he shouldn't play. I totally get that. But I'm also like, man, I want to know. And I think on some level, so does the staff. They want to set like a precedent, and maybe he doesn't need to play all 3 games. But if he looks good in this game, they're fine. But I think there's something about him playing in the preseason that, again, it's just another point of evaluation that kind of makes you feel a little bit better about his evaluation, and I think ultimately declaring him the starter for Week 1.
So you make a really good point there in terms of wanting to see kind of what he's like at the line of scrimmage. I know in the early portion of the offseason, a lot was made when they get to rookie mini camps and OTAs about his early command of the offense and him directing guys where to go and understanding at a very early portion kind of what the offense is looking for. as training camp has progressed, as a guy that's seen a lot more of it than I have, being able to be there, do you still see him having that command early, or was that something that maybe was just, it was floated out early and then has kind of gone away a little bit?
No, I think he's been great. I think he's done a great job just in terms of showing his command of the offense. And you know, like, he's just checked boxes. So, you know, you mentioned it, the ability to layer throws, the kind of the arm talent, the presence in the pocket, great. But I think the other thing that's helped him or facilitated that looking good, or that those elements of his game looking exceptional, is the fact that he knows the offense so well. Because one of the things about anticipating throws is, like, you got to understand A, the coverage, and B, how the route concept is designed to attack the coverage. So, like, that's him understanding and embracing the detail of the offense. And so I think every day he does something that I'm like, wow, like, that's big time stuff, or like that's a really smart football play by him, or that's a really nice read, or he had to have known they were stemming a cover two here because he was very quick to get that football out of his hands. So all that stuff, I think, speaks to his level of preparation, and I think that level of preparation is something that I think is like the foundation of good quarterback play. You know, like when I played with Matt Ryan, or when I played with Deshaun Watson when he was at the peak of his powers in Houston, like those dudes prepared, man. They knew everything about the offense. Kirk Cousins, when I was with him here, even Jay Cutler to a certain extent, like, they know the offense and they know what they're expecting from you. And I think to have a young guy who's put the time in already and it shows up on the practice field is pretty special. And again, like, we're not trying to anoint him as the savior of the organization just yet, but he's done things the right way. He says the right things. He makes the right throws. And I just want to see him do it in a Commanders jersey in a preseason game, and just kind of help kind of further assert how good he is at the position.
Okay, so I will be honest. Half of us are not trying to anoint him already. I'm not trying to put more pressure on him than is already there, but I've been such a big believer in the kid that I do think, should things go the right way, that savior might be a tough word or a strong word, but I do think he is a franchise-changing player to put this franchise in a position where in my lifetime it has not been. I'm curious if you've noticed, now that we are kind of in the dog days of training camp, and you're really starting to build consistency, chemistry, camaraderie with your teammates, are you noticing a connection between him and maybe one receiver, tight end, running back, pass catcher, whoever it is, maybe a little bit more than the others?
Well, I feel like he's got, and maybe this is just because I watched the position a little bit more closely, I feel like he's got a really good connection with Zach. I think they just seem to be on the same page when it comes to running routes. And, you know, quite frankly, Terry, there's been periods where, you know, they can really lean on each other, and he's throwing with good anticipation. But those are two guys that kind of stick out, and they should stick out. You know, they're two of the better players on the offense. But I think the thing, again, that's been impressive is he does seem to have a good feel. Like, I don't want to say with every player, but like when he's in, like, everything's available. He's gonna read the concept out. He's gonna deliver the ball. Like, he had a beautiful comeback throw. I want to say it was 2 practices ago to, like, OZ. You know, and OZ's a guy that doesn't get a lot of burn, but, like, it was a really nice understanding of how he's going to route, the timing of the throw, and that's just a task, and, like, understanding the guy you're throwing the football to. So while there are certain guys that stick out, like I said, Zach and Terry, I think there's never been a time where I'm like, oh, he's not on the same – like Bryson Tremaine. He was working with Bryson Tremaine during minicamp and OTAs, and Bryson and him were consistently on the same page on, like, timing stuff, like slants and tight ends and, you know, corner routes, taking good angles. So I think it also speaks to just how he throws the football. He throws the football with great patience and the ball velocity makes it very catchable, and I think it's also very forgiving as a receiver. So, I know that's kind of a long way around it, but he does seem to just have a nice feel for the people he's throwing the football to.
You know, you say all these things, and, like, this is kind of one of the reasons why the fan in me looks at this and says there's a real good potential if things go right, that this guy is the guy that the franchise has been searching for, because he checks all these boxes. And like, I was talking to a couple people on the sideline when I was there, and this is more like team personnel people, and everyone is just raving about him. And I happen to have a lot of connections in Baton Rouge with the people down there at LSU, and everyone that I talked to, even before he was drafted to the Commanders, it's a lot of the same things. And, you know, when everybody's raving about you from all these, like, different corners of the world, and then you see it and it all checks out, like that is a real reason for me to be incredibly excited about what the guy could end up being.
Oh, 1,000%. I think that's the thing. It's like you don't want to get too excited, but like at every step of the evaluation process, he's just done it the right way. And like I said this a couple times, like because Craig says it all the time, like he just seems to like he's been given a test and he aces the test, and then it's like the next step comes, like looks good in rookie minicamp, looks good in team OTAs, he looks good in the team minicamp, he looks good in training camp, and there is a natural escalation there, but he just seems to just like kind of meet the escalation, and I think that's all you can ask for. And so I guess what I'm hoping for with this preseason thing is that he meets it like the way he's met everything else, and he just affirms this belief in him and this commentary about him just in general. So I think that's another reason why I'm so excited for the preseason. It's like, can he continue to rise? Because if he continues to rise, then I would have a pretty strong assumption that he's going to rise through the season as well, which is great. And again, he's going to have his bumps, but that's the type of stuff you want to see from the guy you take second overall.
So we'll see Jayden Daniels playing on Saturday. Dan Quinn said it on Sunday he will play. I was at practice on Sunday, Logan, and there was something that I saw that made my stomach drop a little bit. We'll dive into that when we get back. He's Logan Paulsen. I'm Denton Day. It's Take Command Podcast. Take Command Podcast, Denton Day filling in for Craig Hoffman this week while he is going around Paris enjoying baguettes, track and field, two of my great loves. I mean, have you had a Paris croissant, as they call it over there? We call it croissants here in the States.
Croissant, whatever it is. I haven't been to Paris, but hopefully soon.
I've never been there either, so I'm very jealous of Craig. But I was at practice on Sunday, Logan, and it was the first practice that I've been to this year. I got out to one last year. Unfortunately, just with the schedule, I can't be out to a ton of them. But I was watching the 11-on-11 drills, and we saw Jayden Daniels getting a lot of the reps with the ones, which was very, very exciting. But in some of the reps with the ones, there were a lot of design runs for Jayden Daniels, and a lot of those design runs were in the interior. And I have to be honest, that made me a little nervous. And then we saw Marcus Mariota jump in there, and there were also design runs in the interior, which leads me to believe this is not just a Jayden Daniels thing. This is going to be part of the offense. I'm going to need you as a guy that's been around. Talk me off the ledge a little bit here, because when I think of what Jayden Daniels can be really successful at, it's maybe some runs to the outside, throwing the ball down the field. The runs on the inside right into the belly of the beast where there's a lot of contact, those things scare me a little bit.
Yeah, I think that's something that we got to kind of keep an eye on. I think, they're kind of installing like your traditional, your classic quarterback runs, and we can't talk too much about the scheme of it. But I do think that like when you look at stuff that Brian Johnson did when he was in Philly, you see some crossover there. You look at some of the stuff that quarterback run stuff from Buffalo, you see some crossover there. You see some stuff from Cliff when he was in Arizona with Kyler. Like there's a lot of that kind of interior stuff. And again, I think what I would assume is that they're just trying to figure out what works best for them. Because like when you watch him as a runner, he does have a pretty good feel. He's a little different than Robert in that way. I know he draws the Robert Griffin comparison quite a bit, but they're different stylistically in terms of their running style and their running perspective. So I think what I would assume they're doing is just trying to figure out what gives them the best opportunity to be successful. Because some of those like quarterback runs where you're pulling people, like they call it a GT or whatever, which everybody runs, every college team runs it. Those are interior runs, but because of the blocking surface and how the defense potentially could fit that, it could turn into an outside run. So I think right now there's a lot of stuff that, it's like, oh, you don't want him doing that a ton. He's not this big guy. He's not Jayden Daniels. He's not Hurts from Philadelphia. Like he's a different stylistic player. He's not, what's his name up in Buffalo?
Josh Allen. He's not like Josh Cam Allen. When he was in Carolina.
Yeah, they're different, but I do think there are benefits to sprinkling that in. Like as you show it 1 week, and maybe you don't run it again for 3 weeks, but now the defense has to prep that. They have to prep their fits versus a running quarterback and work the run scheme and make sure that we're gap sound and make sure that even though we're a gap short, we can still be +1 in the pass game, which everybody wants to do. So I think even if you run it one time, there are advantages to it. And so, and again, I don't know that that's who they want that's what they want his identity as a runner to be in this offense. I think you're just trying to see what works with the offensive line, see what works with the personnel, and ultimately see what you can kind of get to. So because I had the same thought. They had a couple quarterback runs a couple days ago, and you're like, oh, Like, why isn't this more like traditional zone read or traditional, which there are elements of some of the stuff they're doing in there. So I don't want to say like they're only in like this power downhill quarterback run stuff. To me, it's just like, what is he good at? What are we good at? What can we kind of major in? What can be a minor kind of change-up type run? And I think that's all stuff that we're going to see over the next couple of weeks.
So you mentioned something interesting there in the idea of seeing it 1 week, then maybe holding it for 3 to 4 weeks and sprinkling it back into the offense. What is your level of trust in Cliff Kingsbury doing that? Because I remember, we'll take you back 2 years ago, you and I working on the Team 980 doing an in-game show, and we're watching week 1 against Jacksonville with Scott Turner calling the plays, and he's doing a bunch of this dynamic stuff and things that in this city we haven't seen. And then we never see that again. It's just never utilized after the first half of that game. Do you trust Cliff Kingsbury to be better about kind of the balancing and the managing of making sure that things aren't forgotten when they have success?
Yeah, I do. I think when you watch what Cliff does, one of the things, when you watch him in 2021 and when you watch him in training camp, he does have a good feel for calling games. He's got a really nice kind of understands the pacing, understands when to get back to stuff. He does a good job scheming guys open and finding one-on-one matchups. So I have a lot of confidence. I think the more I watch Cliff at practice and the more I watch what they're doing and the more I watch kind of the variability that they bring from a schematic standpoint, I'm like, I trust his mind. You know what I mean? And, it's not only Cliff. It's like trusting the staff too. It's like, hey, man, like this was good for us this week. This is the same front. They kind of give us the same look. Can we get back to it? And it's like, yeah, why not? Let's do that. So it's not only Cliff. It's the staff. It's the run game coordinator. It's the pass game coordinator. It's, him as the offensive coordinator digesting their feedback, right? And kind of saying this is what we need to get to. So understanding what the staff looks like, understanding the intelligence and the strengths of the staff, and then kind of parlaying that into how does that maximize me as a play caller, I think is all important stuff for Cliff to kind of keep in mind. But to your point, I do think I trust Cliff so far. And again, I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt. But the reason I'm doing that is because what I've seen in camp is just like it's good high-level football schematics. And I think that's something that informs a football mind and a football perspective that I would assume would allow him to kind of keep some of that stuff on deck when he needs it.
Are you comfortable with the idea of a rookie quarterback and potentially a rookie left tackle? Coleman's been lining up there more and more frequently. It seems like getting a lot of reps at the left tackle spot. Are you comfortable with a rookie pairing in that regard?
I am. I think, if Coleman's ready to start, like he's ready to start. And I think, obviously there's reservations about him as a player, playing a little bit of guard last year. Is he fit the kind of prototypical tackle mold? And I'd say from a body size standpoint, probably not, but from a movement standpoint, absolutely. And I think when you watch one-on-ones, you see a guy that has tremendous athletic upside, tremendous balance, and a tremendous length in his arms. And the movement skills are something that really sticks out. Like his ability to redirect with rushers is very, very high level. And that's something that as I do like game planning for, different defensive ends around the league and like what are things you look for in terms of weaknesses of tackle. One thing you look for slow feet, right? Because it allows you to kind of get to a bunch of different moves and a bunch of different perspectives. And so with him, he doesn't have that. He's got great feet, and then he's in a conjunction with the feet, he's got great balance. So the ball of clay is there for him. It's just about, can he develop it? Can he continue to improve? And can he show that he can do it versus top flight edge rushers? And so over the next 2 joint practices with the Jets and, with Miami, I think he'll have an opportunity to say, hey man, like I can handle, Will McDonald from the Jets, or I can handle, I know Hassan Reddick's holding out, but if he does practice like that style of edge rusher, you got Chop Robinson, you've got all these kind of high round draft picks down in Miami as well. Like if he goes through this next testing phase, like, and he's a rookie and he shows that he can handle it, what's the issue? He's playing next to a veteran guard. That guy can really help him out and get him on the right page. So I'm not that worried about it. Obviously, if he's not ready, I'd be worried about it. But I do think he is, much like Jayden Daniels, slowly progressing. And unlike Jayden Daniels, I think there's more questions about him. But I do think ultimately, like, if he's talented enough, it's just about whether it comes together before week 1 of the NFL season.
So I promise I did watch more than just Jayden Daniels when I went to practice. And, I was sitting there on the sideline talking to a bunch of people in the media. And obviously we kind of love as media people, like projecting the final 53. And, it gives us content headlines, all these sorts of things. But I'm sitting there talking with a couple of people over there, Logan, and we're trying to count out the number of guys from the Ron Rivera era, draftees, that are going to be on this team. And we're thinking, there might be 6 or 7, and one of the bigger question marks in that group of 6 or 7 is Jamin Davis. So when they're doing 11-on-11 drills, I'm watching to see how they utilized him, and they had him with his hand in the dirt a little bit. I know he's been getting a lot of reps at the edge, and I was watching him in that spot, and obviously he's new to this, so that needs to be taken into consideration. There's not a huge comfort level, it looks like, when it comes to him with his hand in the dirt. As we get to the joint practices, the preseason games, and you'll get real live game reps, what are you looking for from Jamin Davis to kind of make sure he secures his spot now that they have a linebacker group that, with Luvu, Wagner, and now seemingly Jordan McGee, they got a pretty good unit there.
They have a great unit, and I think it's very telling to me that he has not got any reps with that group. A guy that has been, like, traditionally in his career a reps-based guy in terms of production. Like Ron always used to say, he needs reps, he needs time on task. He has got no reps at linebacker. He's been getting reps at edge rusher, and I think you see the athleticism, you see the length, you see the size. I think he looks like an edge rusher, and he looks like a guy that can make an impact there. But I do think that's something we've talked about on this show before, that pass rushing is an art, and it takes time. It's like dancing a little bit, right? Understanding the rhythm of when to throw my move, the spacing, what can I get away with, and that. When you watch elite edge rushers, your Nick Bosa's, your Max Crosby's, your Myles Garrett's, like, they have this great feel for that. And that takes time to cultivate. And even, kind of average edge rushers have a good feel for it. And I think the one thing about Jamin that is interesting is that he doesn't have that feel yet. And so, much like we were talking about with Brandon Coleman, like, if the light comes on for him, it's going to be really dangerous. And I think the one thing is, with Coleman, you see the bulbs start to glow a little bit, which is exciting. With Jamin, the bulb's still off, and he's playing hard. He's doing everything he can, but we haven't seen that flicker yet. And if the flicker comes in OTA in preseason, or if it comes in the joint practice, then I'm going to get a little bit more excited about his prospects there. But right now, I think he's still got a little ways to go. And quite honestly, still, maybe you watched him, obviously. What do you think? I think a lot to show in terms of adding value there at that position.
A lot. Yeah. I mean, he was getting reps in and out with the ones, but that also meant that he was going up against the ones on the offense. And you mentioned the moves. It didn't feel like, as the kids say, there was a big bag there. He has like some level of athleticism. Yeah. He got a bag. Well, Jamin ain't really got that big of a bag right now. I don't know if he can. I don't know that he's good at bending the edge. And, he has all of this athleticism. And I feel like being able to kind of bend the edge a little bit is something that, if you want to be a legitimate pass rusher in this league, like that, if you're creating a bag, that's the first thing on the checklist there. So, I mean, I don't know if that's one of those things where you can teach him that in a short span of time. And then you get into this tough spot where, do we want to keep a guy who is an athletic freak? And he certainly is that. No one's going to say this dude's not athletic, but do we want to keep a guy that we have to kind of string along teaching as we go throughout the course of the season? Or do we want guys that have already not mastered these kinds of techniques, but are way more comfortable with these kinds of techniques?
Yeah, I think that's a perfect way to articulate it, right? You've got guys on the roster who can do it. And I think the one thing about Jamin that I would say in terms of role, and maybe they get to this point, I will say this staff is much more aware generally of people at open practices. They show a lot, but they don't show as much, right? They've got, people walking around with signs saying, please don't record. That's a new thing this year, right? They've made a couple I've heard people the media people saying, like, hey, we can't talk about scheme, or we don't want this. And we're all trying to accommodate that because we want the team to do well, right? But despite that kind of effort to kind of keep the practice somewhat closed off and somewhat contained, I do think they're keeping some close to the vest. So if I was going to use Jamin Davis as an example and kind of maximize what he does, like, there are times in one-on-ones where he's so fast off the edge, and that he can just run around the tackle and it doesn't actually time up poorly in terms of like when you got the stopwatch out. Like he's just running around the tackle. So for me, if he's not super refined as a rusher, he kind of falls in that perfect category of like a spinner. And what that is like a guy that you'd bring in on third down. You'd have him line up at defensive end or line up at linebacker, line up in a different maybe 3 technique. But then you would kind of create picks and stuff where he can really run the hump, attack different gaps, use his speed, and not usually that player is a pretty good technical pass rusher, but they are also very, very fast, right? Because they can get to different things, almost like a blitzer would, to create these pressures. So I think that's one way that maybe you see it in the preseason. Maybe that's something that comes out of joint practice as a better way to maximize him, especially while he's still cultivating that skill set you're talking about. So again, that's how, if I'm putting my coaching cap on, that's probably how I would approach him at this moment, because he is so raw. He does need some skill set to develop there, I think. But that's a way to kind of mitigate some of that rawness and kind of say, hey, we can, while you're working on this, we can maximize what you do well, which is be fast and strong and long with these certain packages. So, but again, like even that seems like a lot of work for a guy who's kind of on the fringe of the roster a little bit. You know what I'm saying? There's no reason, there's nothing about this staff that says we have to make this work. They're not invested in him. They didn't draft him. So why not, take Dante Fowler and put him in that role? And that's someone that has done it and has been successful. And like you said, is more proven. So there are ways where I see him making an impact, but it takes a lot of work. And if I'm a coaching staff, like I want to put that work into people that I think are going to consistently make plays. And I'm not sure, again, we're pulling for Jamin. I want Jamin to make the team, but I'm not sure as of right now he's shown that yet.
Yeah, the preseason, the joint practices, they're going to be crucial for him. And I do think he should get more reps than your traditional ones, even if that means it's the third quarter and you're going up against threes, just to kind of get comfortable doing some of the things that they're going to ask him to do. One final thing I wanted to mention about practice, as I mentioned, I went to one last year. I was at my lone one on Sunday. Oh my God, the environment and the atmosphere is so insanely different. And I mean that in all the best ways. I mean, they're starting I don't know what they call the drill, but it does look very similar to what you guys might do in high school to kind of get guys pumped up. And that's drill, not to be the bag drill. I love it. I mean, that reminds me of like football being fun. Like that's you and your boys just kind of getting riled up to go out here and play the game. From that to the way that everybody on the coaching staff seems to be very uplifting. Like they realize it's training camp. You're going to make mistakes. But it always feels like there's any criticism is then met with lifting the guy back up. I was really, really impressed. This is my first time seeing kind of Dan Quinn, the leader, in action. I was really impressed with the way that they operated on Sunday, just from a start to finish of practice mentality.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely, especially if this is the first one you've seen, especially and the last one you've seen is under the Ron Rivera era, especially kind of a dead year for that whole team. It does feel dramatically different. And I've said this before, but I'll say it again. It's just the NFL season's too hard and too long not to have fun. And I think Dan does a good job of making sure they get a lot of work done, but that it's enjoyable and it's energetic. Like we were doing highlights on the Command Center show last week, and there was a big play. I think it was OZ caught this fade down the sideline, and the sideline was in the shot directly behind it. The offensive sideline, and you see Terry and Jahan and people running around throwing their their towels and going crazy, and that's just something you didn't see last year for whatever reason. And I think I'm going to give credit to Dan because I played for Dan in Atlanta, and that was something Dan always prioritized, is making sure you had fun and you were supportive and you were energetic at practice, and it feels different. And having been in kind of a more traditional system where it's like come to work and grind it out, and I played under Dan. Like I remember being in Atlanta and telling young guys, I was like, you guys do not understand how special this man is and this environment is. And I think I'm just so grateful that this team is getting to experience that right now.
And having your leaders buy into that, like having Bobby Wagner come in is huge. Yeah. And there was a play where him and Jayden are they're getting competitive. Like Jayden took some all the way to the house, and he's celebrating and dancing and all that, and they're having fun with it. But then they're dapping each other up, and then they're conversing. I think having the leadership of the team buy into this new atmosphere, which again, as you mentioned, it's very difficult not to. Like you all grew up playing the game where it was literally just fun. There wasn't all these like massive financial figures involved in it. You were just out there hanging with your fellas. Seeing that atmosphere back, I say back here, because it hasn't been here a ton. That to me was, even just as sitting there on the media, like all the fans are getting involved in it. It was really a lot of fun to be out there.
No, yeah, and hopefully that continues. And again, like think about it, if you get guys to spend 5% more of their time at the facility, 5% more time on film, that's how you make a winner. And there's coaches get to that stuff different ways. Some coaches mandate it. Some coaches are neurotic about making like in Baltimore. They are always getting punished for being over time on the practice field or being too physical. Here, this is a way, like, instead of using a stick, it's like we're going to use a carrot, man. It's like, come on, guys, football's fun. Remember that? And I think you're going to get a lot more buy-in, a lot more production out of this group, which is always exciting.
So there's going to be a massive change in 2024, not just a change in Washington, it's a change for everyone. New kickoff rule. We saw it in action in the Hall of Fame game. I got a crazy take. I'm going to run it by Logan. I think I might have cracked the code to this thing. We do that when we get back here. He's Logan Paulsen. I'm Denton Day. It's Take Command Podcast. Take Command Podcast. He's Logan Paulsen. I'm Denton Day, sitting in for Craig Hoffman this week. Logan, I watched the Hall of Fame game a little bit, and I say a little bit because I didn't really care about the offense and the defense. I wanted to see this new kickoff rule. You and I haven't spoken since this became a thing in the NFL. Your boy's big time in on this new kickoff rule. I saw it once in the XFL, and I was like, hold on a second. They might have done something. After watching it in the Hall of Fame game, I'm even more pumped. And I think if you are a smart coach, you can really make a difference in whether you're a 7-win team or potentially 8, 9, 10-win team with just a couple of plays. Your first thoughts of seeing it in action. It's different at the NFL, right? Like, all love to the XFL and the UFL. It's different when you have NFL players doing it. What did you see in the Hall of Fame game from it?
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing is that I've seen in practice with the Commanders and in the Hall of Fame game is how hard those frontline blocks are. It used to be because you had more time, you could get really far back there, set up, and those blocks are hard anyway. But now they feel like they're even harder because those guys, the coverage team closes the different distance so quickly. And the relationship between the return team, that front line kind of in that setup zone, and the returner is so far that the coverage team really can go both ways. And you talked about how in the XFL it felt different. You don't have the athletes that they do in the NFL. Even these guys who are kind of third string, fourth string guys, like, they're just different. They're cut different. And so I just was like, this is going to be really hard, and you need to be really creative to kind of maximize that group up front, because, again, that's the hardest part. And, again, it's the violence, the aggression that you get from it. But that's the thing. I was like, man, this in the XFL, it was almost like 1-for-1. It was almost easy for them to get those blocks in the front. And then now it's like, oh, my gosh, like, that's something that they're going to have to really troubleshoot and figure out the best way to get that done. Because if you can find an advantage there, which I do think there are advantages to be had, you could really maximize that group.
So the first takeaway that I came away with after watching the Hall of Fame game, a lot of the things that you just mentioned, but because a lot of those things that you just mentioned, if you're on the return unit, you have to limit the amount, I think, of defensive backs. Because they're just not natural blockers in the way that you're going to need in this kind of setup. So, I mean, honestly, if I was a special teams coach and this was 2012, I would put you out there, because I think you'd be really good in a position to where you're athletic, you can move, but you're not afraid to put a hat on a hat and really seal something off. One of the things that I think is going to be so interesting, if you can come up with designs to just create a sliver of space for a guy, there really isn't a lot of second line defense. So, like, once you break through that initial line, effectively it's going to be you versus the kicker. And one of the things that I was kind of fooling around with as I was, driving to and from stations and coming into this podcast, you're going to need tight ends. You're going to need, I don't know if fullbacks really exist in the NFL, but a stockier running back, some wide receivers. But am I crazy for thinking if you have a really athletic tackle or guard, it might be beneficial to put them on there if they can quickly get to a hat, create an edge there, and maybe take on two guys at a time there? Am I crazy for thinking an offensive lineman can make it work?
Yeah, so I think I think initially I was like, oh, that'd be interesting. Like, if someone floated that to me, and I was, oh, that'd be interesting. Let's check it out. Right now, watching it, especially watching it in practice, it's just too fast. I don't know if the offensive lineman can run and get set before that. Before your Jeremy Reeves is right on your toes, like ripping across your face. I agree with you. You want that body type in there, but I think a lot of teams are going to have a hard time finding the speed to kind of get back there to that setup zone as quickly as you can before that coverage team is on you. Like, again, like that was the thing that stuck out to me. Because, like, oh, you could do something creative like that, like have a big post guy work maybe kind of a wall kind of setup, like a down block, kind of like on power, have a kick out, attack that crease. But the problem is, A, is the movement of the big guy, and B, the ball placement of the kicker. That's something else that has been really interesting to watch in terms of how they practice it with the Commanders. Because, like, you can set that up. Like, I can put my big guys on the right side, and we can set that return up. We can get the double teams all worked out there, and then the kick out guys. But if they kick that ball left, there is no feasible way I can get back to the right. There's no feasible way I can get to the return. So I think that's the thing that keeps popping out to me is there are a lot of issues. And you almost need to be able to call the return so that it can go both ways. So if I'm doing, like, let's say power right or whatever, where I'm getting a double team and a kick out, I need to be able to say, hey, check, balls left on the return and get the same thing set up kind of on the fly. But again, the speed of it, because, like, again, everyone's like, oh, the XFL made this so dynamic. For whatever reason, like the XFL, when they did it, it was a straight wall across. Guys would just run into each other. And now it's like it's like a porous sieve. And I'm sure better teams will be better at it than others. But I think that's something where it's like, wow, the coverage guys are so much better here. It's going to be really hard, I think, to kind of come up with creative stuff because you got to maximize that frontline group. So I was thinking, like, the best way, in my opinion, is to employ some type of, like, rugby type setup with the returners. You know what I mean? Get two guys who can handle the ball really well. Kind of, I think Kansas City was on the right track there with the guy they brought in from the Sevens Rugby League, where it's like you can attack a perimeter, both sides. He catches the ball, you attack the perimeter both sides, you kind of loop the other returner around, and then we get a 2-on-1 on the coverage player, and I can pitch or I can dive. And I think, like, that's a kind of an easy way to kind of get some of that trickeration going. But again, like when I watch the returns in practice or when I watch the returns in the Hall of Fame game, like that's great, but I have to block everybody else. And there's just so much bleeding from that internal return that it makes it really hard to make that happen.
I think the speed that you mentioned, when this initially passed, a lot of people were like, think of the reverses you could do and all this stuff. The reverses are not going to work.
No way.
Not a chance. Like unless you have like Noah Lyles reversing to Usain Bolt, you're in trouble. There's just the guys are going to get there too fast. You're really going to have to rely on these bigger dudes, the tight ends and the bigger running backs, just making sure that they can kind of attack somebody quick.
Yeah, I think that's the thing is like when again in the XFL, like you'd see these crazy reverses and they developed really nice. But I was like, I don't know how you do that now. Like and I guess it's just the team speed of it. And again, like the problem you're going to run into is like you could set those O linemen up or set those big tight ends up in the front line there if the ball's kicked right behind them, because then guys have to run right into them, But if the ball's kicked away, all those guys they're not fast enough to run and cut them off, and they're going to run and make the tackle on the football. So it does present a lot of seeing it live, executed live. It does present a lot of really interesting problems. And I think some type of misdirection can be accomplished. It's just you really got to think about the best way to maximize it. Not because you can't do it or because it's too fast. It's because the ball placement makes it almost impossible. So, like for example, if I kick the ball back right to the return right, to the return left, and my returner catches it. If I want to do any kind of misdirection, my off returner has to run all of that distance to potentially fake the handoff. It's just there's too much space and too much time now for that stuff in the back. And now if you could consistently get that ball right in the middle, then we can do some stuff, right? Because we have a consistent set point. We can move guys around to accommodate that. But the other thing that I think is interesting is there's no surprise onside kicks anymore, which again could be beneficial in terms of moving some of those backs, those up backs. Like maybe you move them to the middle, maybe you move them out, maybe you kind of stack them in a different way because you don't have to defend the field in the same way. So those are all things, again, I can't wait to see how this is innovated over the next 17 weeks, because like there are some smart dudes in the NFL. There's some really innovative guys. There is something here. It's just right now I haven't thought of it, but again, that's probably why I'm not coaching the NFL.
I'm excited about it. Logan, this is always fun, my friend. And the next time we do this, we're talking joint practices, and then we're really ironing in, or zoning in, I should say, on this preseason matchup with the Jets and seeing Jayden Daniels play for the first time. Always fun, my friend.
Yeah, thanks, Denton. Good talking to you, and looking forward to the next podcast.
He's Logan Paulsen. I'm Denton Day. We'll see you later this week, getting ready for Commanders Jets this weekend.
Thanks for watching this clip of Take Command, which has a brand new home.
That's right. You can watch on YouTube at the Team 980.
You can also listen to full episodes in the free Odyssey app, which is now enabled with Apple CarPlay. So we'll just, follow you around.